this video is sponsored by PixArt. Getting people to click on your videos is the hardest thing about being a YouTube creator, but it's also an essential thing that you need to know how to do if you want to be a successful creator on YouTube. I have to admit that I'm still learning new things about this topic every day, and even after being on YouTube for around 10 years now, I still find it's a difficult thing to work on. However, after 10 years on YouTube, I've definitely picked up some pointers or some components that are really important to remember when you're really trying to get people to click on your videos. So in today's video, we're going to go through some specific points on how to get people watching your videos, and also some thought processes in particular that will be really important to consider too. But for those of you who are new here, hi, my name is Kaylee and I'm a beauty and fashion photographer based near Sydney, Australia. But I'm also a content creator, and I started this channel a few years ago to talk about all things business, social media, freelancing, and content creation. And as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about how to get people watching your videos today, so let's get straight into it. Now, I really want to preface this video by saying that there is no exact formula to really make this happen and to get people clicking on your videos. There are so many different types of creators here on YouTube, so I think if there was a one-size-fits-all formula for this, it would kind of be a bit strange in a way. But in saying that, I do think that there is 3 specific components that people tend to consider when they click on a YouTube video. These are very general components, so you can really tailor these to your own creations or to your own niche, and they really are core aspects to remember when you want people to click on your videos. So diving into the first component, and that is the title of your video. Now, I'm going to be super cliche here and say that you need a good, engaging title to get people clicking on your videos. And I know that it's cliche, but it is the truth. And funnily enough, this isn't something that I ever took into consideration very early on in my YouTube career. I feel like I was more concerned with SEO at that point, and that was really what had been drummed into my head by other tutorial channels and content creator gurus and things like that. It was always about the SEO at that time. Nowadays, I tend to rely on that a lot less when it comes to my videos, and more so on the title of the video. This is so incredibly important. And I really feel if I had found this out sooner with my YouTube channel, that I probably would have had even more progress a little bit more quickly. I feel like I definitely could have grown my audience in a quicker fashion, and especially because YouTube would be hopefully pushing my content out more to people just from having a more engaging title. So I really don't want to leave this point just at that, because I feel like that's too vague and it's too general, and I want to give some practical information that you can use with these components today. So we're going to get straight into that now. Now, I think a really good way to help emphasize certain words in a YouTube title is to actually have certain words in caps. And you have to be careful with this because it can come across too strong in some ways, or maybe just a bit too intense overall. But I have found that sometimes using keywords in your title and putting them in caps can really help grab people's attention a little bit more. And it's just a little thing that you can do to help make that title more engaging. So for example, on this video here, I talked about some reasons that you may not be getting followers on Instagram. And you can see here in the title that I have specifically highlighted not in caps. And that is to kind of grab your attention and think, oh, am I doing something wrong? What mistake am I making here? Maybe I should look into that a little bit more. And that was a purposeful thing just on my end. So it is a really easy thing you can do with your YouTube titles to kind of make them a little bit more engaging. My process with actually writing out titles tends to be a little bit more lengthy these days because I really like to consider things a bit more. I now know that it's one of the most important aspects of getting people to click on my videos. So I want to make sure that when I do put the title out, that it is one that I'm confident with. So in this instance, I usually tend to write down several titles for each video that I do, and I tend to swap like different parts of it around just to make sure I've got as many different options as possible. I will sometimes write the same title out in just slightly different ways if I feel like I'm pretty close, but as I mentioned, I do tend to have quite a few of them for each video. Now, sometimes I will get a second opinion on this because sometimes when you've been writing the titles yourself, or when you've been focusing on editing a video all day, sometimes it's really hard to find what's actually grabbing your attention, and it's hard for you to think straight when it comes to this kind of thing. So sometimes I may get a second opinion from a family member or my partner. I like sometimes getting his opinion too, because I know he's got more fresh eyes when it comes to this kind of thing. So if he's looking at it from an outsider's perspective, he can really see what's grabbing his attention the most as someone who would be potentially clicking on my video to watch. Now, I'm also just going to go back to the point of SEO, and I don't think that you should focus on this as much as what a lot of people do say online. I don't believe that SEO is everything, and some of the videos that I've done that have had quite poor SEO have actually done way better than a lot of my other videos. I think it's always good to have a mix of some search-friendly content, but I think for the most part, don't rely on SEO to get your video out there. If you have an engaging title and people are clicking on your video, YouTube is generally going to push that out a lot more than just a search-friendly video. I like to kind of look at SEO these days as a bit of a bonus, but I really do prioritize having the title look good and engaging. Now, another process I like to do when I'm writing out my titles is I like to research, and I think this is a really important factor. I try to research what has actually worked in that niche or in that topic before in terms of a title. I will go and research on YouTube and find similar videos or videos with similar topics, and then I'll see what some of the titles have been on the videos that have done really well. And I think that's a great way to go, because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And quite often there's people out there who have already experimented through this with their titles, with certain topics or certain types of videos. So you can kind of piggyback off that a little bit. I'm not saying go out and completely rip titles or copy titles. That is not what I'm saying at all, but I do think it is important to see what has worked for other people and maybe try and keep that in mind when you're writing out your own titles. Now we'll be delving into the next component, which you might have already guessed will be your thumbnail. Now, I've heard this statement of thumbnails being one of the most important factors for a really long time now, and I am ashamed to say that once again, along with titles, I didn't really take this advice early on. I feel like when I was starting with YouTube, I kind of tended to ignore thumbnails altogether. They would always be a second thought for me. I would think of them probably 5 minutes before I was about to post my YouTube video, and in turn, I feel like I lost a lot of potential audience in doing that because the thumbnail wasn't engaging, it didn't look good, it wasn't eye-catching, I wasn't paying attention to the text that I was putting on the thumbnail. There were so many issues with my thumbnails earlier on, and even still to this day, as I mentioned with titles, I'm still learning with this. I think you do as you go along in YouTube, and as you create content, you learn things all the time and really what works and what doesn't. But I'm going to stress this once again, alongside titles, thumbnails are king. You really need to pay attention to how your thumbnails look if you want people to click on your videos. So into some of the practical information about creating thumbnails now. It's really important to make sure that you do not have a distracting background. And my personal advice with this would be to either blur or cut it out altogether. Now, I have a favorite way of doing this, and that actually brings me to today's sponsor of this video, PixArt. I love using PixArt to create my YouTube thumbnails, as it's got everything that I need and it's really easy and simple to use. One of the main tools that I love to utilize when using PixArt for my thumbnails is the AI background remover, which means if you do have distracting elements that you need to remove, you can do this with the click of a button. You can also easily add an alternative background into your thumbnail, and there are thousands of images to choose from on PixArt. Not only can these images look more professional, but you can edit them further to suit your branding and content. For example, in this image, I'm blurring the background to bring the focus into the foreground of the thumbnail. If you want to try out PixArt for yourself, make sure to click the link in the description box below and go check it out. As I just mentioned, it's important to have an eye-catching thumbnail as well. Now, this goes along with text, and I think this is more important than what people realize, but if you're going to put text onto a thumbnail, you really need to make sure that it's very visible. And there's some little things with this that can really make this a problem. So for example, the timestamp in the bottom right corner of a YouTube thumbnail is a real pain in the butt sometimes, and you do need to make sure that if there's any text on your thumbnail, it needs to be high enough that it's not being covered by that timestamp. That's because when people are looking on their phones at thumbnails and things like that, quite often the thumbnail is a lot smaller what they're looking at, and that timestamp becomes bigger. So that actually covers quite often a lot of text on the thumbnail. So it's just important to remember the positioning of the text. Make sure it's also easy to read, it's clear, because once again, if that thumbnail shrinks a little bit, which it often does depending on the platform that you're viewing a video on, you often won't be able to read it very well. So making sure that it stands out, there's not too many distracting elements beneath it, and that it is very clear. And I think it's really important to find a style that works for you. Now, when I say style, I mean that people can look at their homepage in their browse features, and if your thumbnail comes up in that bunch, they can immediately tell it's your video without even having to look at your channel name underneath. I think this is a really powerful way to go about creating thumbnails, because you will start to build a very invested audience. When they see your thumbnails come up on the browse page, they might even click on it straight away, because it might be your subscribers, for example, who are clicking on those videos. And if you've got a style of thumbnail that really works and is very eye-catching, it's a very specialized style and it stands out in that way, people are really going to get to know your videos very quickly. And then another tip that I have based around thumbnails is to make sure you're not just simply replicating the text that you have in your title of the video into your thumbnail. Make sure that you use this new opportunity that you do have in your thumbnail to create a different title, or to create something that is more engaging engaging or shorter, snappier, something that really grabs people's attention. Keep that in mind and don't just necessarily replicate the title of the video into the thumbnail if you feel like you can make it more engaging again. And now finally onto the third component, which is the topic of your video. So obviously the topic of a video is going to be really important and it's going to determine which audience you'll be able to reach. Some topics may get more clicks compared to other topics depending on your audience too. So this actually requires a bit of experimentation and research to see which topics are popular on your own channel. For example, if you have a photography channel like I do and you've been mainly posting retouching and photography tutorial videos for a long time, and then suddenly you decide to post a cooking video on your channel, generally you're not going to get as many clicks. Unfortunately, trying to force a new niche or pivot like that is very difficult on YouTube, especially if you've built up quite a bit of an audience. And it's also really likely in that situation that YouTube won't start recommending your content because not enough people, and especially your subscribers, are not clicking on the videos to watch. It's really important to consider the type of content you're posting and what people may want to watch, especially when it comes to your own audience. Thinking about your content and whether it's considered to be trending or potentially a tutorial. Is it motivating or inspiring, relatable or informative? Really think about what your audience would want to watch and why they would want to watch it. You really do need to put yourself in their position quite a lot of the time, especially when it comes to the beginning of planning your videos and really looking at the content that you're going to be putting out there. You have to put yourself in their shoes and think along the lines of, what would I want to watch? If I was them, what video would I really want to click on the YouTube homepage? And sometimes just by doing some of those things, you can really start to have a lot more clarity around what your audience actually wants to watch or what people are more interested in out there. Now, sometimes this kind of process and these kind of components that I've talked about today are going to take a while to start implementing and then to also find out the information that you need. This kind of thing doesn't always happen overnight, and that's okay because YouTube and creating YouTube content is a process, and building your YouTube audience is generally going to take a little bit longer, but that is completely fine. It's all part of the process, I promise. But I hope some of these components have really helped you out today, and I hope that some of these tips were a little bit more insightful on how to get people watching your videos. Let me know in the comments section below what you thought and what your thoughts are on this particular topic, and if you have any advice for younger creators, I would love to see that advice down in the comments, and I'd love to start a conversation about this topic. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't subscribed to my channel already, make sure you do because I'll be posting a lot more in future. But thank you so much as always for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.